Hello, my name is Nichola Smalley. In honour of the Swedish to English Literary Translators Association's 40th anniversary, Translators Aloud is hosting a series of readings of Swedish literature through to the end of the year. Each month, a CELTA member will present one classic or one contemporary Swedish book. This month, I'm reading from my translation of the brilliant young novelist Amanda Svensson's magnum opus, A System So Magnificent It Is Blinding. And here it is. The name on the cover. A wonderfully funny, resonant novel about coincidences, interconnections, and conspiracies. A system so magnificent it is blinding follows the divergent paths of three triplets. Sebastian has a new job at the London Institute of Cognitive Science, and he's about to fall in love. Clara follows a doomsday cult to Easter Island and is trying to pretend she's not in love. Matilda is on holiday with her partner and his little girl in the blue, blue summer of northern Sweden, trying to escape a colour that doesn't exist. Then something happens that turns their world upside down, and in doing so, draws the interwoven threads of their lives back together. It's a riot of words and images, a family saga unlike any other, and it's in the shops today. So I'm going to read a couple of pages from the very beginning. The baby blues came quickly to the triplets' mother. But before that, the babies, of course. Sebastian was first, then Clara, then Matilda. Or perhaps the order was different. Afterwards, no one could really be sure, because then came Pandemonium, as one of the newborn's heartbeats and then breathing went awry. A doctor rushed into the room. A baby was borne out at lightning speed, and in its place was brought a tray bearing open sandwiches, cordial, and 3 little Swedish flags. Bad timing, obviously. And a father, the triplets' father, was suddenly left empty-handed, with not a clue what to do. He picked up a cheese sandwich, while his wife, with the 2 remaining babies clutched one to each breast, delivered the afterbirth. It wasn't until afterwards that he realized what he ought to have done was run after the doctor who'd gone to try to revive his child. Perhaps he was in shock. That's what his wife would think later. And in any case, the baby was soon back again. Suddenly there it was, lying in its father's arms, tiny, wrinkly, and gulping for breath, but quite clearly alive. It was like getting a second chance, the father thought, looking down at his newborn's fluffy head, and he decided to take it. The triplet's father wasn't stupid, and even the first time he stuck his hands down his dental hygienist's knickers, he'd understood 2 things. 1, that he didn't have strong enough nerves to maintain a double life indefinitely, and would therefore be forced, sooner or later, to admit his affair to his wife, who he actually loved very deeply, or at least had a very deep dependency on, which, the father reasoned, was essentially the same thing. And 2, that the best time to do this would be at the exact moment she'd become responsible for not 1, but 3 children, making it unlikely she'd be able to manage on her own, and consequently unlikely she'd throw him out. This turned out to be a wholly correct assessment. In the jittery moments after her 3 children had been born into the world on a wave of blood and pain, the triplets' mother, a priest at All Saints' Parish in Lund, experienced a fear of the future that was so intense it caused her very belief in God to evade her mockingly. The fact that one of her babies had almost perished from what the doctors would later call spontaneous asphyxia neonatorum with no lasting complications, unsurprisingly exacerbated this fear. For the 10 minutes during which, instead of the 3 babies whose soft feet she'd for months felt pressing against her hands through her abdominal wall, she'd suddenly only had 2, she experienced a sorrow so cruel and bottomless that all the sorrow that was to come, including that inflicted by her own spouse, paled into insignificance. For those 10 minutes, she'd felt ready to throw God out with the baby's first bathwater. For what God could tear a newborn baby from its mother's arms before she'd even had the chance to touch its wrinkly little hand? Compared to this divine betrayal, the betrayal of the man who'd stood there, mouthful of Gouda and fluffy white bread, solemnly swearing to stand by the babies and her if she'd only overlook his dalliances with the dental hygienist, appeared little more than a trifle. That's not to say she didn't cry. That's not to say she forgave the guy. But she was happy. She was happy all the same. So dizzyingly, joyously happy about the babies, about suddenly having a family, even if it was somewhat skewed and scuffed and a bit of a sham. Suddenly the gold in the world stood out so brightly all around her, the coffee, the clementines, the fluttering hospital curtains on that unusually warm, sunny autumn day, as finicky little Sebastian finally latched onto the breast in exactly the right way and took a full feed for the very first time. Everything tasted heavenly. All the colours were vivid. Every bodily sensation, even painful ones, took on a new, almost erotic dimension. In a meadow of powerfully scented flowers, since flowers were still allowed on labour wards in the late 80s, over the week she stayed in the hospital with her 3 rather underweight little babies, the triplets' mother slowly but surely regained her faith in God and divine love, of which the children were unquestionably a part. Things were undeniably less certain regarding her earthly love for their father, and yet she endured for more than 2 further decades. There were other things to think about: feeding schedules, the cost of music lessons, secrets. But of course, the marriage was bound to crumble in the end. First came the triplets, then the drama and the tears, and the drama again. Then almost 23 years' ceasefire. But the day finally came when the last of the triplets left home. The firstborn, Sebastian, who, perhaps because he'd been the first to leave the womb, had the most difficulty flying the nest, even though he flew no further than to a room in the local student halls. The same day, their father moved into a single room at the local hotel. It didn't even have a minibar, but there were stars outside the window, indeed, the whole universe. He looked out of the window, and for the first time in his life it struck him that the universe was very, very big, and that a person, in comparison, was very, very small. Thank you.